be talking about Kelly and Lisa are going to be talking about economic diversity in contemporary Timor-Leste. I believe you'll be giving us a bit of an overview or the opening chapter and setting up the book that has just been released. I'm not quite sure how long ago, Lisa, but over to you both to give a bit more of a perspective on this book and an introduction. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anne. I think I'm going first. Is that right, Kelly? Yeah. Okay. And thanks you, everybody, for being here and for that acknowledgement to country, Anne. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Timorese people and the elders in Timor-Leste who both Kelly and Teresa and I have worked with for very many years now, and this talk is informed and in honour of them as well. Informed by and in honour of them. I'd also just like to say before I begin, I'm going to show a little PowerPoint which just gives an overview to our book, that my own work personally, just like to acknowledge those in the room, particularly Catherine, and the work of J.K. Gibson Graham, which really, from the very beginning of the time I started working in Timor-Leste, started to inform my thinking about place there, as well as the work of Anne. Thank you, Anne and Prior, for organising this event. It's a great honour to be here, as well as Jenny and others. And I'm hearing about the University of Western Sydney is reminding me of that fantastic keywords workshop that we had there many years ago. Isaac, you were there too. And if you have had a chance to look at our the introduction to our book, you'll see that we draw on that keywords paper to guide us through some of our thinking of the diverse economy space in Timor-Leste as well. So I, for one, am just so happy that that paper was published and that we were able to gather there at that workshop in Sydney in 2000, and was it 18 or 16? Can't remember. Yeah. And also just to acknowledge Jane Jacobs here in the room. Wow, like my PhD, I worked in Indigenous Australia for my PhD work, and your work was so important for me in that phase of my career. So yeah, it's wonderful to see this coming together. So I'm going to share my screen. I haven't taught this semester, so can I share my screen? Yes, I can.
Yeah, you have it.
Yeah. So I stumble through here. Where am I going to? Okay, so I can't see you anymore, so but I'm just going to flick through this quickly. Here's the cover of our book, Economic Diversity in Contemporary Timor-Leste, and I'm just giving you a short overview here on behalf of the editorial team, which is Kelly, myself, and Teresa Kuno from the University of Coimbra, and we hope that Teresa will be joining us soon. It's dedicated to the memory of two really wonderful individuals who, of course, no longer with us, Dr. James Scambary, who was from the ANU, and Professor Lucas da Costa, who was an economic geographer from the Universidade de Paz in Timor-Leste, who thought in different ways around economic diversity in contemporary Timor-Leste. Can I also just say in my introduction, I forgot to acknowledge Anna Carolina and Pione, two scholars of Timor-Leste, and it's wonderful to have you here, and all the work that Anna Carolina did in helping us to put this collection together. Thank you, Anna.
Lisa, can you just put it onto full screen? It hasn't gone onto full screen for some reason.
Oh,
yeah. So just can you see down the bottom the little icon of making it full screen, right on the right-hand side of your?
It's full screen for me. You see, that's
oh, is it?
Yeah.
Press F5 on your computer.
F5.
Yeah.
Maybe I just have to do that.
Someone's saying it's full screen for me.
Hmm.
Oh no, it's typing what I'm saying.
Oh well.
So we're just seeing all the slideshow kind of stuff at the top. That's all on our view. maybe stop sharing and try sharing it again.
Yeah, all right.
Because it's something to do with the whether you're in, what is it called, Microsoft, the shared space. Right. So then, so see on the top of that, you've got a presenter mode thing. Present. Just looking to see what you've got on your view there. Present in Teams. No, because we're still seeing your view with your side.
Do I want to go share
and the
at
top?
the top?
Maybe. Yes, share. Try that. See if that makes it. No, that's no, that's not the. So it's the bottom there with the little kind of full screen mode slideshow.
Is that better?
No.
Oh,
Oh, it probably. I'm sorry, I don't know how to.
yeah.
To
We
do
can
it.
kind of move our screen over so we see it more and not the other things. Maybe that others can do that too.
Yeah.
Maybe we should not waste too much time on it.
Oh.
All right. Let's keep going, Lisa.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So the can you even see it now? I'm still sharing, aren't I? Yep. So the aims of our book are to contribute to the debate about the diversification of the economy in Timor-Leste and make clear the issues at stake in the diversification of the market-based economy. Of course, Timor-Leste has been a new nation state for the past 21 years now. And although it's a very rich and very diverse economy, for the most part, the public discourse focuses on the so-called formal or capitalist economy as the subject for most discussion and attention. But we wanted to highlight the ways in which diverse economic practices far exceed this singular capitalist way of thinking about the world. And you can see here, we're using language that we're drawing on from the diverse economies literature. So elucidating the forms of economic diversity already existing in the country and giving public face to these economic phenomena that we have noticed and been paying attention to, writing about as scholars of the new nation state for the past 20 years or a little bit less. And we're interested in the phenomena, processes and agents which played pivotal roles in social reproduction, such as women care, ritual obligations and the exchange of services. And we'll be hearing, particularly from Teresa a little bit later, more about a particular chapter in the book which focuses on women care and ritual obligations. So in the book, we talk about local community-based economic values and arrangements, community-based entanglements with a market-driven economy. It was interesting when I presented this at the Timor-Leste Studies Association conference in Dili in July. An economist in the room, took me to task for the use of the word entanglements. He thought that it had a very negative kind of underpinning to it, as though I was suggesting it was a bad thing to be entangled. And we had a bit of a discussion around this word of entanglements. I don't know whether we want to talk a little bit later about the usefulness or otherwise of this as a concept. But in the book, we talked about the colonial and post-colonial governance practices through which the market-driven economy has permeated the country. And really importantly, me, and I think to the editorial team, the creative and place-based ways through which local people have responded to these transformations through colonial times, through times of the Indonesian occupation and into the independence era, even though they might be elided in public discourse around the economy. So Kelly is going to talk to us as soon as I stop speaking around the theoretical framework of our book, which is one of economic ecologies. And by this, we're talking about the historicised, localised, heterogeneous and complex combinations of knowledge, production, distribution, exchange and consumption by which people and things are replenished, and critically, the more than human well-being is ensured. So it's a more than human thinking about economy as well. So the book's divided into three parts. We have a more looking backwards in order to look forward, I guess, to glimpses of the colonial economy. We have a second part where we're looking at local economic dynamics and all all the richness of the ritual life and the exchange of services and communications with the more than human world that make up these local economic dynamics, as well as a very interesting chapter by Susanna Parnes on the concept of atan, which is sometimes glossed as slave or servant in the context of Timor-Leste. And Susanna unpacks, of course, the ways in which these community economies are not always full of love and well-being, although there's always relationality, but also the more damaging ways in which these community economies can sometimes express themselves, particularly as far as individuals are concerned. And then in a part 3, we're looking at economic transformation, particularly in the light of the mega development projects that have emerged in Timor-Leste over the last decade or so. It's a country rich in oil and gas, and the government has expended a lot of that oil and gas wealth on trying to front load the economy through special economic zones and development of onshore oil and gas reserves, portals or development areas, which of course are riding roughshod over the customary or more diverse community economy. So many of these chapters look at that, but they also look at the impact of China in the forging of a new Timorese economy, in diversity or not, the role of remittance labour, the role of, in my case with Sue Jackson, we talk about carbon offsets and the ways in which that is emerging as we argue, positive benefit to the particular local economy that we're working with there. So you see there's a whole range of different contributions in the various chapters in the book to thinking about diverse economies. One thing I want to say, because thank you, Anne, I saw the very nice, what was it, Jenny, overview of the book that you put on your CERN website. When I clicked that link there, I noticed, and it makes me a little bit upset with the publisher, that it takes you to a page where you can buy the book. It's actually open access, but it's a little bit hard to realise that from the web page. I think when you go into the publisher's webpage, you actually have to search their open access area to find the book. Otherwise, it appears that you have to buy it. But just for everybody's benefit there, it is open access if you search around for that when you search for the book. And just, acknowledging too, before, as I hand over to Kelly, her pivotal role in this, the coming together of this collection, because it was Kelly that back in 2018 organised and hosted an event at the University of Brasilia on this very topic, and many of the authors that are here in this book were participants in that event, and there was a lot of support there from Kelly's university in Brazil and the Brazilian Research Foundation. So that's it from me. I'll stop sharing screen and hand over to Kelly.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And good to know it's open access. Kelly, do you need any assistance with sharing your screen, or are you going to be sharing your screen?
No, I don't need that.
Okay.
So
over to you.
Let's go. Yeah, okay, thank you. So thank you all for the opportunity of being here. And so good afternoon. As I said before, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. About 10 years ago, I first came across with the works of Catherine Gibson and Julie Crahan, which became a source of inspiration for my work in Timor-Leste, and as well for all the team of undergraduate and graduate students researching about post-capitalism politics in Brazil and beyond at my University of Brasilia. Here you can see a copy of The End of Capitalism as We Knew It in Portuguese, that the book was translated into Portuguese in Portugal and is available in Brazil now. Anyway, but beyond that book, I have also came across with articles writing by authors of the Community Economies Institute, which helped me to question, for instance, the idea of subsistence economy. So I thank you all for all the knowledge you have made available, which are very useful to expand our perspective about economy. In my quick presentation, I would like to share efforts of theoretical synthesis and conceptual construction we have made in the book Introduction, that is the category of economic ecologies. This is a category of analysis coined to account for complex economic scenarios, such as those that exist in Timor-Leste and to some extent everywhere else, but with distinct emphasis and configurations. To provide a deeper perspective about the idea of economic ecologies, I would like to share very quickly the set of ethnographic and bibliographic experience that led us to its proposition. I have no time to explore in deep all the ethnographic and references I will quote, but I hope you can resume them by reading the book and other products we are working in. Also, I will focus on the learnings I myself have had by looking on economic dynamics in Timor-Leste. Liz and Teresa for sure have other experiences which are explored in the book Introduction. So from my perspective, in terms of ethnographic experience, I would like to highlight three facts that were very important to me to elaborate the idea of economic ecologies. The first one was the lack of specialization in the work routine of my interlocutors in Timor. My fieldwork is based on a particular island in Timor, that is Atauro, where just about 20 years the market economy arrived in a stronger way. The second ethnographic experience I'd like to highlight is the pivotal role of helping people in social dynamics in Timor-Leste. So this is a country where phenomena as bright wealth, for example, is very, very important in negotiating social reproduction among different houses and among people. The third experience is the positive evaluation people have about certain interpersonal debts among adult men. So the debts among people is not experienced as a bad things necessarily. So these were the ethnographic experience. So I turn now to highlight the importance of a certain literature to eclaborate the idea of economic ecologies. The first work I'd like to quote is Sara Araújo's concept of ecologies of justice, which is based in turn on Boaventura Sousa Santos' concept of ecologies of knowledge. The second set of conceptual tools that were very important to me and to all the team, to Lisa and Teresa, is the concept of spiritual ecologies elaborated by Lisa Palmer and Andrew McWilliam. The third concept is the idea of articulation of modes of production, elaborated by Claude Mériassou. The fourth is all the discussion made by Mayfair Young, who, inspired by Catherine Gibson and Julie Graham, urge us to put capitalism in its proper place. The next concept that was very important was the idea of tension and coexistence between the market and community economies, as discussed by Stephen Goodman. And finally, my own category of local governance complexes that was elaborated to make sense about local governance in Timor-Leste. So I turn now to the concept of economic ecologies. Taking into account these and other conceptual legacies, as well as the ethnographic background mentioned earlier, we propose the idea of economic ecologies to characterize the localized, heterogeneous, contingent, and complex combination of institutions of knowledge, production, distribution, exchange, and consumption by which human and non-human agents reproducing themselves or are reproduced. Economic ecologies do not form a system that can be stabilized. Their constituent parts maintain considerable autonomy and coexist in time and space, cooperatively or competitively. Although the components of ecologies are to some extent interdependent, they are mobilized by social agents in diverse and particular ways based on contextual conditions and assessments. Furthermore, the institutions that make up these economic ecologies are not exclusively imagined as economic facts. They can appear as total social facts and are often legitimized by phenomena such as kinship, religion, neighborhood ties, political relationships, and ritual obligations. In addition, these ecologies can be organized in specific spheres or zones of production, circulation, and consumption, where unique moral and ethical precepts prevail, as well as transactional spheres of short, medium, and long-term duration. Economic ecologies result from dialectical relations between material and symbolic configurations, forms of social organization, and moralities that coexist adaptively or competitively and affect and transform each other. From a certain perspective, the category of economic ecologies is redundant. However, we have strong reasons to justify the term. Each choice responds to the following argumentative aims. First, making distance and difference from hegemonic neoclassical narratives which reduce all economic diversity to a market economy, simply called economy. Second, highlighting the multiple and diverse phenomena that enable material and immaterial reproduction in each particular context, and make visible the intersectionality and mutuality between various economic phenomena. So that's it. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Sorry for my mistakes. I'm so sleepy here, and it's difficult sometimes to be very awake at this time of the day.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing. And you've given us lots to think about, Kelly and Lisa. And in the time we've got left, which is about 25 minutes, you've given us some questions. So I guess, would you like to hear some questions or comments from people in this space, or would you like us to kind of tackle the questions you've given us, Lisa and Kelly?
I just wonder if we could read out, given that Teresa's not here, because some of those questions came from her. Would you like me to read out her abstract? Or, I mean, I have a whole paper, but we might not have time for that. She sent me through the text. But
yeah,
would you like me to read out the abstract? Because it might just go to those questions as well.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
Because I really want to recommend her paper in our book. It's so beautiful. And it's called Women's Work in Elui. And it's co-authored with the East Timorese matriarch, Mina Bessa, who has sadly passed away before the book was published. So I'm just going to find I'll just read. So Kelly, Teresa's paper, I think there might be a mix-up in terms of time zones and things, was called Seeing Mina Bessa, who is her co-author, and it was in honor of her. And the abstract reads, based on our research, we question two concepts, productive work and abundance. With this research, we argued the following. Firstly, we assert that all land work is productive, although not paid and performed within the domestic sphere. In other words, it produces the abundances that are essential for the endless flows of life. Secondly, the concept of abundance can be thought of as the power to assess and state what kind of resources and wealth are valuable to a community, giving it power to decide what can never be reduced to commodities, and so to live and live well.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that. So I guess let's just take a moment to digest what we've just been hearing and have a look at the questions in the chat space, because many of us, I think it's difficult sometimes to multitask. So just reading the questions that Teresa and Kelly and Lisa have provided us with, and then perhaps we can think of other comments we might want to make. I certainly wrote lots of different interesting words and ideas down as you were talking. So we just maybe just be quiet just for a minute or so that we can read and digest. Okay, so you've given us some really easy questions to unpack in about 20 minutes. That's my first thought. It's like really existential questions. So does anyone have a comment or a kind of discussion point that they'd like to bring into the fold that actually, you know, I guess taps into some of the questions? Would anyone like to either offer a point? Yes, I think I saw Jenny, your hand go up first. Yeah.
Thanks, Anne. I wondered, Lisa, looking at your first question, And because you made that reference earlier to the idea of entanglement, and it seems like the idea of entanglement really bears on that first question. So I was sort of wondering if you could give us a couple of examples of the sort of entanglements where things are not necessarily confrontational. But and you don't, I mean, I'm just throwing that into the mix. You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I can. I think that's a great question. Kelly, do you want to, can I throw that to you?
Yes, I have just a first comment for both the questions, but I think I just should present some impressions about the first one, and I think you should complement that. So I would say that the choice is not the choice, but the fact of the economic ecology to be more confrontational or more complementary is a matter of the perspective we take to look at the phenomena. So from the perspective of the state, it is confrontational, as the state is working to replace the way people relate with the community economy, okay? But and with local economic institutions. The state wants to erase all these local institutions from the community, from people's life, because the state wants people to be more connected with a market-driven economy. But from the perspective from people themselves, they have a very complementary perspective about how to combine institutions stem from the market-driven economy and from local economy. So depending on the perspective we take to look at the phenomena, we can have one or another perspective about how the economic ecology is experienced by people. Lisa?
Yeah, and I guess just to come back to the specific point around entanglement too. So I'm thinking about my own chapter along with Sue Jackson in the book, and we're talking about an agroforestry program. It's where farmers are being paid to plant trees, and those the carbon offsets that are being generated are being sold into the global carbon market, and that money is being returned to the community, sometimes directly to the farmer through the payment for the trees, and sometimes for wider kind of community wealth projects. Or community projects that are being decided upon by the community of farmers involved in the carbon offsetting. But through the research, we can also see that this kind of modality of planting trees and negotiating value, while on the one hand, it's in this very complicated international carbon economy that it's operating, it's also operating within a local economy in which people are always continually negotiating value through the life cycle of things, whether that's through the life cycle of people and children as they grow and marry, and their parents are recompensed for the value that they put into growing their children when they're exchanged and they transfer from one house into another house, or whether it is the growing up of trees from saplings into adulthood and eventually getting recompense for their annual contributions to carbon offsetting, and eventually there'll be timber products which are seen as a bequeath to the children, an inheritance to the children of the owners of those trees. But critically here in negotiating those values, the farmers are very attuned to it being a live issue, one that that they need to be continually engaged in from the perspective of their own understanding of the life cycle of trees, the life cycle of things, and the way these things are negotiated. And they're somehow trying to bring this together with the workings of the international carbon market. It's a very difficult thing to do because they're worlds away. But from the farmer's perspective, they don't see them as being so divergent that they can't be negotiated. they'd like to know more about the international carbon market, but they're very sure in their own capabilities to negotiate through it. So I think that's one example of these entanglements, which, and from coming back to what Kelly said, I guess where Sue and I are looking at that from a complementarity perspective rather than a confrontational perspective. And most of the literature within geography is very, very critical of these kind of processes. And what we want to do is we'll say, well, why are local people engaging with them? It's not just because they're being dudded, it's because they're seeing pathways, in this particular case anyway.
And just a follow-up question. How do you think the people that you were describing as, I think, farmers, that are able to do these negotiations, these complex negotiations, how do you think they've learnt that skill, or where have they?
Well, they're not doing those complex. The broker, the kind of it's a Melbourne-based social enterprise, are doing those sales, and then usually not to big corporates. They're to kind of individuals or small to medium businesses based usually in Australia. But the farmers are negotiating with that social enterprise. So that's where the negotiation is happening at the moment. But when they get dissatisfied with that, then they say, well, you know, they actually want to come here to learn more about the market so that they can align that with their own ideas about negotiating value and feel, because they sometimes have the suspicion that they're getting dudded, and perhaps they are. There could be an argument that as the price goes up, and if the price they're getting paid isn't also going up, then there does need to be movement in these negotiations. And the point is that they're very much up for it, but from within their own perspective.
Yeah, and if I can, I also would add that if you look at the way people are using the money they are receiving from the market, we will see that the aims of their involvement with the market economy is not accumulation, as we know that. So they are using market resources to reproduce their own institutions. So this is another index, I think, of this complementary or of that negotiation that we are discussing here.
Catherine?
Yeah, that's fantastic work. And that paper, Lisa, that you wrote about carbon work has been so useful in teaching. When I was at Harvard last year, people really got into that paper. But I was wondering whether, you know, if we step back and think about what the challenges are for economies at the moment, we're starting to think of what are the transformation pathways that community economies or the social economy should be following, because we kind of realize that we can talk about diversity as a way in, and we can talk about ethical practices and try and highlight them, but at some level there's going to need to be bigger picture transformational strategies. And it seems what you're doing is thinking about how do you speak back to the economists who still have the transformational pathway being capitalist development or market-driven development, and yet so many people are saying that's not the pathway. And so there's a whole group of people, the foundational economy people, saying we need to decommodify basic needs and take them out of these market-driven logics. Obviously, we have to degrow, we have to be commoning and all these kinds of bigger picture things, which it seems to me the work you're doing really feeds into. But what happens in most majority world countries where there's still an active forms of community economy in the rural areas is that the value, the abundance that people are working with just gets ignored as something that can lead a way to a different way of living. It's always seen as something that has to be obliterated in order to go to the making money to buy the things you need, as opposed to getting the things you need directly or through these transactional community relationships and so on. So I feel like we need a bigger engagement around the context in which you could talk to the Timor-Leste government to say, why is it you're always hitching your cart to this developmental agenda when we know it's bankrupt, and yet we've got so many insights here into how to live. Obviously, basic needs need to be addressed in a more direct way too in some areas, but there is ways in which people have been planning for intergenerational resourcing, for dealing with abundance and surplus in useful and equal ways and so on. But those kind of big, those big agendas don't ever get kind of legitimized in the same way. And it seems like we're getting enough information to be able to illustrate some of these points now about how, if basic needs can be met through a non-commodified production, and even though it's forms of markets, but markets that aren't driven by an accumulation agenda, this is something that's going to distribute goods and services and meet needs, and hopefully also help to degrow, because it'll be doing it in a way that's perhaps more in tune with ecologies and so on. So I think that the economic ecologies argument could be really used in a way to try and engage with these more macro pathway kind of discussions, and really, but how do we need to kind of really pull up these development agenda people that are still talking about the market-driven route. And it seems like, your economist who picks up on entanglement, well, what's he offering? When has he got a pathway for trying to deal with needs directly? Or is it still, what is the development pathway that people are talking about in East Timor, and how might the work you've done kind of intersect with that is kind of what I think would be good to try and discuss. And you've probably got a lot of ideas about that.
Do you want me to go first, Kelly? It was interesting. This economist, he couldn't get his head around entanglement because he was very much in a kind of a purified space.
Yeah.
So at least he was along that way. He had the capitalist economy and, for want of a better word, the customary economy. But he didn't really see how there was this kind of, he couldn't think through the entanglement of them as being anything other than a critique, or because they were no longer pure. So maybe there's some of this work too is about just, unpicking and showing the ways in which these entangled complexities work for people. I wonder, this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm a bit suspicious about the decommodification, because these people in Timor have nothing. They want commodification, do we have to decommodify things? If we go back to thinking about the gift commodity continuum, which is just the old basic economic geography in this space, can we think about commodities in new ways without losing the term commodity, which is the way that, like, these people that I'm working with in the forests of Timor-Leste, they're being critical geographers are shutting down these spaces like Red Plus because they're commodifying nature, but people need a pathway forward. So is it the way that we're thinking about commodity in too simplistic or too pure terms that is stopping our engagement with these entanglements in these particular spaces? Sorry, that's just a little rant that I'm trying to think through as I'm writing something now.
I mean, in your blurb, I was thinking about this idea. You talk about the assemblage of institutions that are mobilised for reproducing collective life. So what you're talking about to me, Lisa, sounds like this ability of, say, farmers to traverse these different spaces that include things they see as commodities that are actually going to be embedded within their other practices, like their understanding of, different spiritual ecologies, as you've written about in other work, and the life of trees and the life cycles of things, both human and non-human. So they seem to have an ability to fold that or make sense of this, commodities, so that they don't see it as a critical thing, but as a problem, but more as folding it into their sense of collective life.
Yeah.
So what you're calling for then is a bit of a reframing of how we think about commodities.
maybe, because I think it's a privilege to negate the commodity.
Yeah.
That's actually Kelly's term, that beautiful term that you read out about. What was it? The institutions? Mutual, what was it? I forget that, what you just read.
What you've just said. Institutions that are mobilised for reproducing collective life.
Yeah,
and you talk about it as the assemblage of institutions. I mean, that's in your blurb for your introduction. I mean, I think to come back to Catherine's point, though, you know, I hear it so much in teaching, you know, at the moment, teaching students from Bhutan, where there's this constant feeling that, you know, people are leaving rural areas in search of, you know, work in capitalist enterprises in cities. People are choosing out migration. They're leaving farming. They're leaving what they see as traditional practices behind, you know, and it's something we talked about a lot, Catherine, in our Monsoon Asia work, you know. So it just feels like there's still a perception that all these practices, some are not, they're just not valued anymore, or they're not seen as a way forward by so many people en masse. It's like the faith still needs to be put into a sort of modernist, capitalist, you know, export kind of orientated, like that still seems so prevalent in people's mindset. But I think what you're saying is that in the Timor-Leste context, you're not necessarily seeing that.
I would say that in the countryside, we still have a valorization of local institution that is very strong. People are very aware that they cannot live without their local institutions. And when we talk about this idea of assemblage of institutions, we are talking about, for instance, bright wealth. People are totally aware that they need that to their material reproduction. And as well as the religious rituals. So they are part of their local economy. And even so, most of people also desire to be out of that economy, because I think we have also to recognize that for some people, that economy is very oppressive also. If you look at the condition of women in the local communities in certain circumstances, they have a very hard condition there. So even the local economy is very contested by some people. So there is I cannot see any consensus, even consider that people are very aware that they need the local institutions to reproduce their lives.
Isaac had his hand up at some point. I don't know.
So we're probably just in the interest, because we could go a few minutes over if everyone's still happy to stay on, but maybe, Isaac, this will be the last question for discussion, and then if anyone has a burning question beyond that, they could even email you, Lisa and Kelly. Is that okay? Yeah, maybe you can put your emails in the chat space. Yeah, Isaac.
Okay. I was just actually typing it as a message because I have to leave. But it's it's an observation that in the with the word confrontation, but also that strong narrative of critique of red, which I've been very prone to myself. You know, I've been very prone to a kind of bleak view of that. I recognise that it is seeing power in a very zero-sum sense. And I think that the participants in these schemes, the communities, are very well aware of the implications of commodification as well. It's not as though those consequences elude them, but that they are embedded indeed. If you're using the term political ecologies, they're embedded in all kinds of obligations and commitments which they are wrestling with, and their subject positions are multiple at the same time. So they are wrestling with the implications of encroachment and the corruption that can come with red schemes that legitimize other kinds of deforestation or But they are also enacting spiritual practices. They're enacting future generations of access to non-forest timber products. And they're probably got a personal motivation as well, that they, they're personally driven by a belief in what they're doing. It isn't all bad. It is, there is a lot of good in that. I suppose the question is, why would they do it? If it was such a terrible and disempowering proposition, why would they engage with it at all? So I'm sure they have the agency not to. What I've seen in Cambodia is microfinance agencies in forested areas like Prey Lang, giving microfinance loans to people with no other recourse to livelihood. What's the first thing they do? They buy a chainsaw and they take up with illegal logging groups. So, I mean, an REDD scheme that encourages them to protect trees and doesn't financialize their life with a microfinance loan that they've got to then pay off. So they go and hitch up with an illegal logging gang to pay off their microfinance loan would seem to me to be a better value proposition. That's just an observation, really.
Would you like to make any last comments, Kelly? Not necessarily in response to that specific reflection, but any of the discussion today?
Yeah. Just a final comment related to the second question that was registered in our chat about how to react to the hegemonic economy. I don't know, to be honest, because all the campaign about to expand the marketing economy in Timor is so strong that I don't know how to do it, but I see that is our as social scientists we have the commitment to offer to the following generation a register of about that other lives are possible. And in this sense, I'm very inspired by the provocation that Catherine made in this book, The End of Capitalism, that our narratives, they are representation, and as that we have to work on alternative representation of the world, and this is a political action in itself. That's it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. And Lisa, any last reflections?
No, I think Kelly just said that beautifully, and just leaves me to thank you all again for all the inspiration that you've given us in thinking with, and continuing to think with the work that we're doing.
I look forward to looking at the book in more depth. So thanks everyone for joining us for this CERN Asia event. And if anyone who's here now is interested in continuing to join us in CERN Asia events, we aim to have sort of like 2 or 3 a year, but we have got Liviana events coming up, which, CERN members are invited to join those sessions in November, or in a couple of weeks, I think it's starting, isn't it? So we hope to see some of you there in some of those sessions.
Can anybody join CERN?
Yes. Well, there's a
process.
There's a protocol that's on the website, as long as there's 2 other endorsers. Yes. So please, if you've got people you'd love to endorse, let us know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you, I was going to say, Lisa, I think I can't remember whether you're currently a member